Okay, so we're looking at session 2 of Work with Diverse People. In the spirit of reconciliation, Hayter Institute of Education acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We recognise Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people as the first inhabitants of this nation and the traditional custodians of the land on which we work, live and study. We express our gratitude for the sharing of this land, our sorrow for the personal and spiritual and cultural costs of that sharing, and hope that we may move forward together in harmony and in the spirit of healing. We pay our respect to all First Nation people and acknowledge elders past, present and emerging. Okay, so just on that quick note, just a reminder that some of the topics that we will talk about can be a little bit triggering. When we talk about diversity, we do need to be mindful that other people may have aspects of their culture or their background or their experience that may not be pleasant, and just be mindful of how we're talking about the topic today. Also, if you need to chat, pop up your hand. There's only 7 in at the moment, so sorry, I just lost something then. So we will be able to see it when someone does that, as opposed to me missing it with my group of 35. Okay, all right. So we're looking at diversity, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, looking at some stereotyping, diversity in Australia and work practices. And there are 3 videos, but I will only be showing one. One's 18 minutes and the other one may not be as useful as you'd hope. So just a quick whip around the room, pop your number in the chat and let me know how you're going today. So number between 1 and 10. Halfway there, Robbie. We're a bit slow today. All right, so we'll work through these slides and hopefully people will feel a little bit more better before they leave the session this evening. Okay, so diversity may be the hardest thing for a society to live with, and perhaps the most dangerous thing for a society to be without. What do you think that means? Why do we need diversity? Any thoughts?
Donna, Pierre had his hand up, but Pierre, there's actually a button you can press down the bottom and it puts a hand up for you.
Oh, so thank you.
Anyway, I'm just guessing because everybody's different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and why do we need that difference, do you think, Pierre?
Why do we need that different? Because if we were all the same, life would be pretty boring, wouldn't it?
It would. It would.
If we were all the same, life would be pretty boring.
It would be boring, and what would make it dangerous? What would make it difficult?
Diversity. Um, not sure.
If you think about the like the creative ideas that some people have, like I'm not an innovator. I couldn't be an innovator. So, you know, the only reason we have some of these marvelous inventions that we're even using is because someone very different to me
Okay.
was able to think and work through.
Yeah, I understand now.
Yeah. And then if you think of it in the negative as well, you know, if we're all frightened of people that aren't the same as us, we
Yeah.
avoid them, or we don't, you know, allow them to grow or participate or be included, then
Yep.
it can be really dangerous for other people, really negative for them. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
a bit of a thought process.
Yeah, it is.
Now this video is just a 3.5 minute video about the workplace. I'm not going to play it, so feel free to watch it when you get your links. But what we will look at is a bit of what is diversity. So when we think about it, you know, what does it mean for people, and how does it make a difference in your life specifically as well? So, you know, when we're thinking of diverse groups, people tend to share a characteristic of some kind. You know, when we're looking at communities, so if you look at your community right now, often what they call a group of people working together and learning is a community of practice. So you're developing a community of practice with your fellow peers, learning about the topics, the information that you're presented, the reflections that you go through. So you're sharing some characteristics there. And when you're working with a diverse group, they'll often refer to that as cultural diversity within a workplace. And it's important to remember that it's not just like when we say culture, we often just have in mind like someone that might be wearing a turban or a hijab, or someone that is from a different country. So we need to think a little bit more broadly than just that when we think diversity. We've got our visible and invisible. They've only just got a couple of characteristics up there. What other things do you think would be counted as diversity? What else is physically visible? Sorry, not physically visible, visible.
Culture.
Yeah.
I'm thinking jobs.
Yeah. Yeah. We don't all work in the same space, do we?
Right.
So what are the visible differences? Tracy, if you go to...
Paul's got his hand up.
reaction.
Reactions, yeah.
Yeah. So there's a ... more. So to the right of your black screen of the menu bar. It's all right. Unmute yourself and tell us.
Sorry, I
What about-
muted this.
That's okay. That's okay.
I noticed one of them is disabilities.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
not mentioned.
So physical disability. Yeah,
Or
absolutely.
mental.
Yep. Yep. that would be sometimes invisible rather than
Mhm.
visible. So yeah.
Yeah, which is why I assume it wasn't up there.
Yeah. Yeah, no. Sometimes we don't have everything sometimes. So if we're thinking invisible, we could have mental health. What else is invisible?
Look at what's said.
Could be whether you're Labor or Liberal, Greenies or Fishers, what is it, Fishers and something party? So we don't know that. That's very invisible, isn't it? Unless you're very overt about it. Like my next door neighbour who has a sign for the Greens on his front yard. What else is invisible? Sexual orientation. Yeah, so that would be another one. So we don't know a lot about people. When we think about the iceberg, we see that little bit on the top, but there's a lot underneath that we don't know and we don't see. We need to be a little bit mindful around what we think and how we stereotype people. We do very much make assumptions based on the visual, and we need to really notice, and check ourselves when we're doing that. We also need to remember that not every member of a group is the same, and they don't all hold the same opinions as the rest of the community that they are embedded in, and that they do take some of their identity from. So we all really need to be mindful that we're not making complete assumptions and stereotypes around groups. So that stereotyping is when we assume all members of the group with shared characteristics are the same, and that does or can lead to prejudice and discrimination. So we're needing to really understand where that comes from. So would you say Australia is a culturally diverse society? Pretty much. We have always been. If you think about right back in the beginning, our Indigenous peoples very much larger group and not one simple group that did everything the same. So that difference is like 500 different groups, quite significant. And now 2.4% of the population of Australia. So before 1788, our first Australians were very much a diverse group of their own. And when we've gone to colonisation, then we've actually brought in a whole new range of diverse people. So again, they weren't just one single group. We had British, we had Scottish, we had people from Ireland. I'm not a historian, so I don't know what other groups may have been included in that first colonisation, but I don't assume it was just as simple as Great Britain. And then you'd have the migration with the gold rush. So you're going to have different groups coming in at different times, and the changes that they bring as they come through different cultures from different countries, different backgrounds, different experiences. So that diversity is just continued on. Whilst we have had that diversity, the Immigration Restriction Act and then the White Australia policy was an attempt to downplay and stop that increasing diversity that was actually present in the population. So Asian migration was banned for 50 years at that point. So then we're looking at, you know, what is multiculturalism? Like what does that bring us? What's the benefit for us as a society? And we need to recognise that diversity on its own actually brings some changes to the political systems, to the economic systems, and those initial phases from the White Australia policy onwards were definitely, it was challenging. It wasn't easy for people coming in. But if you think about it now, I would say it's much easier than it would have been previously for people of a different cultural background, ethnicity, diversity to actually come into Australia and to put down roots and be able to successfully live and be included in Australian society. Would anyone say anything to that? Yeah, Robbie?
It's a good thing too because of all the different foods they bring.
Absolutely. So our whole lifestyle, our cafe culture, our restaurant dining has absolutely been impacted. And like, whilst it might sound like, you know, it's good about the food, actually that's a massive thing that has changed cities, changed the economies around where it is, has changed the dynamics of different areas. So you were talking last week about, was it a street or a suburb with the restaurants?
Oh, Blacktown's pretty close to me. That has everything on the main street: Filipino, Afghan, Chinese, Thai, lots of different foods.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it, you know, when you look into it a little bit deeper, the actual impacts are quite significant just in that one area. Paul, you were going to, oh no, he's popped out now. Had his hand up. I missed it. Paul, you had your hand up?
Yeah, it was just what you were saying about the White Australia policy.
Mm.
I'm trying to work out the reference. Are you referring it back to saying that was prior to diversity in the country, or?
No. Like when we think about diversity, we often forget that from First Nations onwards, Australia has actually been a very diverse place.
Because the only reason I ask is that, I mean, I know, yeah, Mayor Billy Hughes was the Prime Minister that was the one promoting it and everything in the 40s and 30s. But at the same time, the actual act came in 1901 and lasted 72 years until Gough Whitlam got rid of it. So I'm trying to work out where the connection is with diversity. I'm sorry, I'm taking notes while you're talking. That's all.
Yep. No, that's all. So where we have the White Australia policy, like Liz has just popped up, that and I haven't got the reference in front of me, so I can't give you specifically where that came from. But it's talking about the fact that they've banned Asians from coming into the country for 50 years. So
Yeah.
the White Australia policy wasn't just about immigration. It was also about some of those policies of education and employment, the impact on First Nations people, things like that. So we yeah, so there's a lot more to than just what I briefly said about what the White Australia policy was. But when we think First Nations and then we're moving onwards, our diversity has just always been present, and it's acknowledging that. Yeah. Robbie?
Like even during the gold rush, I read a book on it about how the Chinese were discriminated against, how they thought that they brought the smallpox and they would burn down their tents and harass them. Yeah, that was a long time ago. But yeah, white people and the white authorities didn't like the Chinese at all, even back then.
Yeah, yeah. So there was a lot of discrimination actually built into the legislation. Yeah. Tracy?
If I remember correctly, because it's been about 2 years now, the section on this from Chisholm was about the Asians coming in and bringing heroin into the country. And then it got passed around and everybody became, nobody was doing as much because heaps of people were stoned. And it was just a commonplace. So they tried to use the White Australia policy to put an end to that and to stop them from bringing heroin into Australia.
Interesting. Paul?
Just going to what Robbie said, on the goldfields, he's right, they were discriminated against and had their tents burned down and everything, but that was relative to the fact that what they were doing was they were panning through and researching what was called mullock heaps. It was stuff that the Aussies had already gone through and thrown aside, and or the pommies in those days predominantly, and they were canned for that because they were finding gold that the Aussies had missed. And good on them. Today it's called free trade.
Yeah, yeah. So, and you can see that, like going back to that little quote, you know, people, it's dangerous when people don't understand or know, and people can react out of fear, and it can be quite negative. Pierre, did you have something you wanted to say, and did you work out how to put your hand up?
Yeah, I did. Thanks.
Right.
I've got nothing to say at the moment. Thanks for that.
Okay, good. All right, so we do have a little video. Oh, sorry, just let me come back to this point. There's a couple of points to make. Multiculturalism is the view that cultures, races, and ethnicities, and those of minority groups, deserve special acknowledgement of their differences within a dominant political culture. So if you think about how multiculturalism works within Australia. And then since 1970s, the successive Australian governments have implemented policies supporting multiculturalism. So we're looking at trying to adapt to the changes resulting from diverse population influx, rather than being challenging and having the dominant culture be stagnant and die out. We're looking at those benefits of having diversity. And the economic benefits, as you said just then, the expansion of global markets, so free trade. So diversity has a huge impact, and the skilled workforce that we then can take on because we've got that diversity within the skills and experience absolutely contributes to our economies. So you'll find more information on that, and you might find specifically what you were looking for, Paul, in the Learner Guiding Chapter 2.2. So that might be where you find some of that, the policy information, the legislation. All right, so I'll just, oh, come back again. Stop the recording. Okay, so what did you think about the video? Any thoughts? was a little brief and just really only looked at one culture a little bit. So when we think about our workplaces and our clients, like take those thoughts around, you know, when you're doing appointment bookings, when you're working with your clients, those interactions that you have, understanding the backgrounds, understanding the significance of actions, physical contact, space, food. It's really important because that's going to support you to develop that relationship with your client. When you inadvertently, and as you mentioned, apologize if you do it, but when you inadvertently are making someone feel not respected or not safe culturally, you will absolutely notice it in your relationship and the type of engagement you have with your client. So it is something to consider, that when you feel like you're not gelling, when you feel like you're not engaging, maybe dig a little bit deeper and see, you know, where is it? Is it not just about personality, which we sometimes will just say, well, we're just not, you know, it's a bit of a personality clash. You just, you know, it's just not a good fit. Is there something there that maybe you could change around this cultural space of being aware and providing that culturally competent care that might make a difference to what you're doing? Okay. So looking at diversity itself. So we need to develop skills to work with a whole range of people with their different needs. And when we look at religious diversity, would you say that on the whole, Australia is a religious nation?
No,
It's
no.
significantly, hasn't it, from
Yeah, it's
early?
dipped to, I think if you went to the last census, it's about 5% that actually say that they're practicing anything.
And
Whether it be,
across the board or just Christianity?
no, my understanding was across the board. The Islamic boys have got a higher hit rate, but they're obviously a much smaller part of the population.
Yeah.
So when you rolled them all out, it's definitely less than 10. I think it was 5.8 or something like that, that actually say, well, I go to the mosque on Sunday or Saturday or whatever, and church on Sunday type thing. That's really dropped off massively. But that doesn't mean that people don't identify with those religions, because they do.
It's interesting, isn't it? The changes over time and, you know, how that changes communities.
Do you
And
think it's because we've never been confronted with knocking on wood in Australia?
sorry,
Like
what was it? We've never been confronted with.
Well, with confrontation. Like in World War II, we were predominantly Christian, and everyone prayed to God that we would win or your family wouldn't get hurt. But like since Vietnam, we've had very little engagement. But you get people coming from war-torn countries, and their religion means it's massive to them because it's a real hardship.
It's an interesting point, isn't it? Does that strife, whether it's like countrywide civil war, internal, does that drive the need for that connection to a religion?
Yeah, I don't know. It's like generating from an upper class. So when I went to a Catholic church when I was a kid, we were all poor. You go to a Catholic church now, and they're wealthy. I'm not sure that progression from lower income to middle to high income hasn't affected the I don't know, a person's the need for a religion.
Mm.
Sort of a little bit, you get a bit slack.
Mm.
I know.
It's interesting. Interesting process of thinking, where religion is really highly, very much a huge part of the culture and a cultural identity or a country's identity, and what the changes economically and politically have on attendance and belief. Mm.
Yeah. If you took a case study of, say, the Philippines or a case study of South America, highly religious countries, very poor.
Mm.
Have a look at, say, England and Spain that used to wield the sword in the Christian world, and look where they are now.
Mm. And then look at the US now. I don't know. It'd be interesting to find out the actual numbers of people that are religious, because looking at it from the outside, when you're looking at some of those news reports, it feels like there's quite a significant number of people in the US that are religious.
Yeah, I think
But I
so. But I think there's about what was it last week? The video, there's like 170 identifications of culture, religion, and groups in the US. Like, that's a staggering number.
Mm, mm.
Like, we're
Yeah,
diverse, but we're not that diverse.
not quite that diverse. So when you look at our list, then we also have secular beliefs such as atheism, humanism, and agnosticism. So, yeah, interesting to consider.
Very.
All right, so here's the research portion of the evening. So, you made a bit of a stab at it, Michael, but how about we have a look at some of the census data, not just for religious diversity, but just hop into census data and bring me back a point that you can find about diversity that is listed in that information, whether it be the number of a certain religion, whether it be the number of people that come from a specific country. Just pull that while we've got some facts from the census. Have you got something, Philip?
Yeah. I don't know.
You found it and you lost it?
I don't know, can you hear
So
me?
much information there.
Sorry. Yeah, I mean, there's tons of information, but more and more people aren't saying what their religion is, and more and more people aren't religious at all. It's the first bit that I've got.
Yeah. Yeah, cool.
Um,
So, and that's an interesting, because I remember from just before the census, there was a very big push from, I don't know who, saying that, like, a vast majority of us grew up in a household where we were christened something, but not necessarily have any connection now to a church or attend church or do anything religious. But yet in a census, we always write what we were christened. So, for how long has our census data been collected for people that nominate a religion but actually aren't practicing that religion at all? So, and I can't remember exactly what they added, a new category to the census question
Yeah.
to say, are you not, I can't remember what it was, but like, are you not involved in religion or have no religion or something like that? Does anyone else recall
Yeah.
that happening at the time? Yeah, you
Yeah.
do. Yeah, so the numbers completely dropped off, but then we were more specific with what religion we actually were in, which is interesting. Any other facts that anyone?
Yeah, I've got some.
Mhm.
Yeah, I've got from the Australian Bureau of Statistics, Christian religion has actually decreased from 1996 to 2021. In 1996, it was 12 million. In 2021, it's gone down to 11 million and something.
Mm-hmm.
But other religions have increased. So Christianity's gone down, and it's got from 1996, other religions have gone down from 652,000 increased to 2 million plus. So, yeah, it's got no religion as well.
Yeah.
Has increased as well. So from 1996 to 2021 has increased by 7 million.
And that's significant, isn't it? It's more than the actual other
Yeah.
religions.
So Christianity's gone down, other religions have gone up, apparently.
Yeah.
That's interesting because they also tagged in which country were you born and in what year did you arrive in Australia. So they're recognizing that shift very consciously.
Yeah.
As being immigration, I guess.
Mm. Mm.
I've got another one if you want one.
Yeah.
Are you still looking for topics from your research? Or?
Yep. Yep.
I just looked up education. And they do break it down into 5-year lots, but in the overall picture of people in Australia between the ages of 15 and 74, 63% had a non-school qualification. So I'm tipping that's tradies and similar. 80% with a non-school qual and 58% without any qual were employed. And 85% who finished a non-school qualification in 2022 were employed in 2023. So I think that's pretty much, it seems to be the norm at the moment that the trades are going through the roof, particularly with this hideous building 2,500 houses a day that they want to do. But at the same time, between 15 and 24, 61% are studying and half of them are also employed.
So very busy at the same time, trying to juggle both.
Well, I think it's trying to pay rent, which is ridiculous in Victoria. I don't know what it's like everywhere else. I assume it's the same.
So we've got that student poverty, placement poverty that they're talking about.
It's about to get a lot worse.
Yeah. So what did you find out, Tracy?
Oh, I was still on the religion actually. Where was it? Sorry, I just kept going through the page. Top 5 religious affiliations were no religion, 38.9%, Catholic 20%, Anglican 9.8%, Islam 3.2%, and Hinduism 2.7%. But yeah, further on what you were saying about whether that's people who practice or not. My kids, and this has just come up in my house recently, I've said this a couple of times, and my kids look at me like I'm talking gibberish or something. They go, "You're not religious." Actually, yes, I am. I just don't go to church and you don't see me pray. That doesn't mean I'm not religious. It just means you don't see it. So yeah, I'm still very much religious. I just don't believe in the exact things that the church do. So I don't feel like I need to be there to do what I need to do.
Yeah.
I do it from here.
And that sort of points to some of those stereotypes and assumptions that we make, don't we? Because we don't see you do certain things, we've made a decision about your belief system,
Yeah.
which is inaccurate.
And
Yeah.
further to what Michael was saying, I think you're also correct in that, yeah, times of war and stuff, what I've noticed is, you know, the amount of people who will suddenly pray to God when they don't actually believe in God when something bad happens. So, yeah, the harder your life is, the more you pray, I guess.
The more we seek an answer. Yeah.
Yes.
Excellent. All very good, guys. Might take this opportunity to have a quick break. So if you come back at 7:10, and we'll continue on with some of the points for diversity. Thank you. Cut the recording. All right. So we briefly mentioned about disability. We talked about physical. Also, we need to consider the cognitive and sensory behaviour and communication disabilities that we might come across. So we need to think about the fact that sometimes it might be permanent, but sometimes it might be just for a period of time when someone's recovering from an injury. So we may need to work with people and adjust our methods of support, our assistive technologies to support how we work with people. And it's really important that when we're looking at disability, that we're not looking at the deficits that people have, but we're looking at those strengths that they have and the most minimal amount of support to be able to effectively function. So that's that person-centered but strengths-focused approach that we want to look at. And it's a big push with NDIS and in aged care, but also in community services where it is about people's choices and their preference, and making sure that we are advocating for their rights and supporting them in that. Okay, and so we're looking at gender diversity as well. When we talk about gender diversity, we might also talk about sexual identity. So be mindful, you know, it's definitely a sorry, just let me. It's definitely a very big topic, and unless you're very well informed, it's actually really easy to trip yourself up when we're thinking gender and sexual identity. So we need to keep ourselves on track with. Sorry, I just looked like that because there was a new button on my screen for some reason, and I don't know what it's about. When we're sorry, now I lost track. So we need to think about how informed we are, and if we don't feel informed and comfortable, that we do a little bit more research, and that we clarify with our clients, particularly as to, you know, what pronouns they want, how they want their documentation to be written alongside your policy and procedure in that regard, and making sure that we're making it a comfortable space for people that come into your service. We do have those legal support, so our legislation, our anti-discrimination legislation, and our Australian Human Rights Commission. So we need to be mindful of our responsibilities in that workspace. And thinking about our gender equality and looking at the efforts of reducing that inequality between males and females. So that's been something politically that's been on the agenda. you may feel that it's not been as successful as one would hope, but it's still on the books, still something we're trying to look at. Then we're thinking about the generational diversity. So do you know what generation number, letter, group you're in? You do, Michael?
Baby
Philip, sorry.
boomers. I think I'm in a baby boomer.
Are you a baby boomer?
I think so. 1970.
I don't actually know. I get
Nah.
confused.
No, you're in the same boat I am, mate.
Gen X.
I'm
Yep.
Gen X.
You're a Gen
I'm
X.
60. I was born in 67, and I think baby boomers were 65.
Hang on, 67.
Robbie, what are
Gen X.
you? You're not a
We're all
boomer.
Gen X.
1965 to 1980 is Generation X.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Yeah.
Liz, what was that?
1965 to 1980 is Generation X.
Ah, thank you.
And I've hit every topic you've spoken about in the last 5 minutes just in my household.
Yeah. So when we look at gender and diversity and generational diversity, massive divides, massive differences. And, you know, there's a lot in the news now about that generation gap. Where do you sit, Robbie?
Generation Y.
There you go.
We're wise. They call us
Yeah.
millennials, but we're different to the millennials. I'm a bit older.
Yeah. So even within that range, like people are categorizing themselves as well. There's different little aspects if you're in the upper range or the lower range. So, you know, that different culture, the different world that we're growing up in. So we need to think as a clinician, as a consultant, as a client, as a counsellor, that, you know, we're talking to someone that may be very wildly different from us. And that gap means that we need to be understanding what other people have been through, the differences specific to that range. Yes, I get that one too, Liz. So looking at our work practices, important to like consider not only our clients, but also our colleagues when we're working in the organisations that you will move to. And one of the things that's important when we're thinking about diversity of our colleagues is the specific types of communication styles that come with diversity as well. So where we are not as familiar with a culture's specific needs for communication, we can cause a little bit of friction, a little bit of conflict. And so being able to identify that will definitely assist you in the workplace. Can anyone think of an example where a different culture or person's background and communication needs to be considered? Yep, Tracy?
Sorry, what was that?
Oh,
I've got messages I was trying to answer. Sorry.
That's all right. You had your hand up. So.
Oh, did I? Oh, that was from ages ago. Sorry.
Okay, cool. Yeah, no. So the question you don't have to answer now. Does anyone have any experience, or can you identify where a different culture or country background means that you might need to be mindful of the type of communication that you have. Yeah, Rob?
Right. If they're like I work, sorry, like working with, like I work with Chinese people and they didn't really speak English, so you have to slow down and kind of communicate what you want a bit more slowly.
Yeah.
Right.
And you have to think about the type of jargon and language that you use so that it's not too complex or terms that, like in English, might not really be understood by others.
I was also working with a young Indian guy, and I was talking to another mate who's Australian, and he lost us within 5 minutes. So that's very much like he was young Indian and just off the boat, or off the plane, I should say. So he didn't understand what we were saying.
Very challenging. And you, Pierre, you had hold on, you're still muted.
Yeah, I was just going to mention maybe like sometimes you might even need an interpreter sometimes, or I translate help sometimes. So
yeah. So it can depend on your workplace, but when you think about probably more so the workplace that you guys would be hoping to move into if you're not in it already, there would be an expectation of a level of English capacity, because you have to do client-facing work, because you have to document, because you have to maintain some of the standards necessary in the field. There would have to be a level of English capacity with your colleagues. Otherwise, they typically wouldn't be able to be employed in some of those areas where you work, depending on if it was a language-specific workplace. But even then, there has to be enough English language to be able to do the documentation.
yeah.
But absolutely, you will still get those smaller, tricky parts of communication where people won't know the actual English language translation. And what else in that sector? But definitely with your clients, the interpreter. You're going to definitely be needing. So when is the you must notify and use an interpreter? In what situations must it occur?
Any situation where the client's safety is a safety issue or a urgent issue, an urgent welfare issue.
Yep, definitely.
In court, would that be?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Any other situations where it's a must when you use an interpreter? Like basically considering anything that requires personal, private, sensitive information, anything that requires an informed consent, any financial or legal matters, they all have to use an interpreter. You can't, and this is where you need to be mindful, you can't use a family member that says that they will translate for you, because it's about that legislation protecting the person's privacy and confidentiality. It's about your code of conduct and your duty of care to ensure that your client understands the information and can make informed choices and consent to that, and that we're protecting their privacy and confidentiality with regards to any matters. So we're, pardon me, we're respecting both clients and colleagues, so we need to be really mindful. Yeah, so non-English speaking background, so and that's a thing, isn't it, Liz? We often use abbreviations and people don't understand the abbreviations if you're not familiar with them. And CALD. Does everybody know what that one is?
Cultural and linguistically diverse.
Yep.
Yeah.
So they
took me about a year to figure that one out.
Yeah, and that's the thing. We use it. We use different terminology very, very frequently, and just assume that everybody understands what we're talking about, and we're leaving people behind sometimes. So, and that will include clients. So, you know, when we drop into that language, we can't really know that they're understanding everything we're saying.
There's plenty of patients on the wards, non-English speaking. Like there's so many of them. Probably each room has someone, and they rely on the staff a lot for that.
Kay suggested we use apps.
Yeah.
You know, other than actually calling an interpreter, you know, where appropriate, we can just use an app and get them to talk into the app. And
yes, and the important bit that you said there, Tracy, was where appropriate.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about things that aren't, you know, private, confidential, legal, financial, need informed consent. You know, if you know what kind of lunch do you want, or you know, do you want to do this? Do you want to do that? Those things. Absolutely.
Actually, that was the exact example they used. We had a role play, and they went, "What do you do?" And I went, "Geez, I don't know."
Yeah. So it is. It's knowing, you know, those must times, because if you don't, it leaves you open to doing incorrect practices, and can be quite it can have some negative consequences for you as well as the client. So we just need to be, and you will find it, you will be in the position where people will say, oh, my friend or my partner, my husband, my wife can translate for me, and they absolutely don't want you to get an interpreter. And it can feel a lot easier to go, oh, okay, yes, we'll do that. Because, you know, you've got to organise the interpreter, and it's harder and it's complicated and it delays things. But you really need to be mindful of when it is your responsibility that it should be used.
I think a lot of us struggle with this too, especially Aussies, you know, from the older generation, where we may not have been around as many people with different languages. I have the perfect example, actually. I have a girlfriend and I who we went to hairdressing school together, and she's Thai. And I had a bit of an issue until I spoke to somebody recently and went, hey, am I being racist because I don't understand? And I kept asking her to repeat herself. And after a while, I just felt rude, so I didn't say anything. And so we got this mismatch of what we thought was going on, and she ended up bleaching my hair 4 times and I ended up with no hair. So, you know, I guess in that situation, an app would have been good.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and like the situation, not for everybody, but the situation that you describe is actually something very common.
Yes.
People will try to communicate, will have miscommunication. You've got these barriers, which leads to conflict, or it leads to a negative consequence for somebody, because you can feel embarrassed because you don't understand, and you don't want to ask the 5th time the same question that you've asked. Yeah.
TAFE courses have that exact same problem. The amount of teachers that have very strong accents and they're talking so fast and I have no idea what's being said. just went over to a couple other people. Do you know what's going on here? No. So we're all sitting there going, yeah, what's she saying?
Yeah, yeah.
Which is
And
not helpful for anyone.
it's the biggest barrier. It's the biggest barrier anywhere is the inability to communicate effectively and
Yes.
have, your messages received and responded to, and have that clear communication. So when you add diversity to that mix, then there becomes a whole bit of shame or embarrassment about not being able to understand or having to ask frequently or repeatedly. It's difficult. And like, I will put my hand up and say, I'm a person that doesn't remember names very easily. And when people are introducing themselves, it is incredibly difficult for me when I say, oh, pardon. And how many times do I say pardon? Because I haven't heard the name and I can't repeat the name. It feels ridiculous. So, like, there is that element in all of us, there are those challenges to communication that we need to really try and overcome if we can. And masks, Liz, was a nightmare.
Yes.
Absolutely.
What do you mean was? It still is.
Or still is, yes.
I actually solved this one recently. I have a disabled child, and he has a support worker who brought up something about him being from another country and how Australia can be quite racist. So I decided to use the opportunity to say, hey, am I being racist in this position? He went, no, of course you're not. You shouldn't feel bad. The idea is they want you to understand. If you can't understand, then, you need to work out some kind of way that you can.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's not
and
racist.
it's just sometimes it is being creative, isn't it, in how we find out what it is we need to do. Yeah. All right. So a little bit of research again. Let me just stop the sharing, the recording, so you can have thinking time.
Well, these two are specific to Victoria, I'm sorry, but
yep, no, that's all good.
Equal Employment Opportunity Act 2010
mm-hmm.
and the Charter of Human Rights in Victoria 2006.
Yep.
They're both still in effect, and they are determined by the Attorney General and the Federal Diversity Act.
So basically, what's the main sort of thrust of it? What's the main statement? Is it preventing?
The overall statement encompassing the lot is that all employees have a right to work in a workplace free from discrimination and harassment.
Yeah. Pretty simple, isn't it?
The Racial Discrimination Act of 1975.
Yeah.
Disability Discrimination Act, 1992.
Mm-hmm.
Equal Opportunity Act, 2010.
Yeah. Is that a national or a state base?
Actually, Victoria.
Victoria, yeah.
There's a new one for Victoria, the Multicultural Victoria Act 2011.
Oh, there's one in Queensland too.
Yeah, so you can see there's a bit of a theme there, isn't there? There's a lot of early 90s. Sometimes you will have an act that's, what do they call it? Has anyone got one that says it's modified or adapted or updated or something like that?
Not here, but I did have, there was lots of examples of that at TAFE where they, there'll be one little thing that's been changed and
Equal Opportunity Act has been modified.
Yeah.
From 1977, and the current, well, actually the most current one I think is 2010.
Oh, that's pretty new then. Yeah.
That's what it says
workplace
here.
gender equality.
Yeah. What about you, Pierre? Have you found one?
Thank you.
Now, everybody's mentioned everything I've found, but
Gotta be quick.
I'm just thinking without finding anything. The Privacy Act.
Yeah. So the PPIP 1998, which has also been updated.
Oh, yeah.
So we've got acts, and they can typically be, you know, quick Google search. You've all managed to be able to find quite a few. Standards and regulations typically sit within an accrediting body. So if I said to you, look up NDIS standards or the aged care standards, what you would find built into those standards are statements or trying to think what they call them, statements around how, you know, preventing discrimination or promoting diversity, ensuring that we're supporting culture and clients' preferences to live the way that they want. And then your regulations tend to come back down into an organisational structure. So we'll sit within the framework of a policy and procedure as well. Has anyone jumped on and found a standard that references diversity?
Equal Employment Opportunity Anti-Discrimination Act, there's heaps of them.
Yeah.
Like being treated with dignity, is that what you mean?
Yeah, like the aged care standards or the NDIS standards, because they're easy ones to grab really quickly because there's a fair bit on them. You will see built into those standards statements around supporting diversity and culture. And dignity comes into part of that, yeah. So there's a fair amount out there, and typically, you know, in the workplace, that's not in your face, as in, you know, you're not required to know the act terribly much, like on a daily basis. But what you will be more familiar with is the fact that from those acts, from that legislation, your organisation has policies and procedures that sit within that framework that are written to ensure that every organisation and every worker works to that legislation. Yeah, federal is the overriding body. Where a state legislation conflicts, it would go back to the federal. But again, on a daily basis in the workplace, that's typically you're not going to have much of that conflict around that. If you're complying with your organisation's policy and procedure, it's built to it.
Okay.
So it has that in place. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Now, work practices and diversity. So we've already just started talking a little bit about that. And so the framework that we just did a bit of research on, how policy and procedure fits in with that, and then what we're doing now, plus the ongoing education that you will have with your organisation, provides that training, knowledge and skills so that you do continue to work within that legislative framework. We're coming across people that have worked in a variety of industries or different countries, different work skills, different policies, different requirements. So it's important that we all understand exactly what workplace policy is and what we need to be doing. The framework protects against discrimination against, you know, age, gender, ability, disability, race, ethnicity, religion, sexual orientation or identity. And our policies and procedures spell that out for us and develop a code of conduct that we should be working to. And it provides those mechanisms internally to prevent or to manage if you feel that you've been discriminated against or harassed or bullied or anything regarding your diversity. And then the organisation really should be supporting that diversity and valuing the contributions that everyone does have. So more information in 2.4, chapter 2.4 in your learner guide if you're looking for that. So we'll have our skills and strategies that we're working on. One of the things that's really important is that we do a bit of self-reflection and identify our skills gaps, and using the tools that we have available, try and upskill ourselves as much as is possible. Okay. I don't think that I'm going to do this little activity. When you get the PowerPoint, one of the things that you might want to do is just do a little bit of research on somebody that has short stature syndrome, and just have a look and see, you know, what assistive technology, what supports would somebody need if they were entering your workplace. All right, so a little bit of a move into Aboriginal, Torres Strait Islander and cultural considerations for diversity in the workplace, just as a little bit of additional information for you. Just a bit of a history. The relationship between Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal Australians is divided into the following phases. The language that their HADA has provided for us, that we're using, the invasion and colonisation from 1788 to 1890. So European culture was superior, their viewpoint. Protection and segregation, so 1890s to 1950s, those laws were enacted to control Aboriginal Australians and protect them by segregating them and confining them. And then we have assimilation from 1937, agreeing that Aboriginal people not of full blood should be assimilated into the wider population so that they would gradually lose their identity and disappear into the wider community. And then integration, self-determination and self-management from 1967. So Aboriginal people were granted citizenship, recognised as members of society, so that political shift occurring at that time. And just prior to that, some of that movement, so some of those protests and advocacy from some quite well-known Aboriginal First Nations people assisting with that change. And then reconciliation. So from the 1990s, we're looking at restoring friendly relations and moving forward from there.
1967, is that where we stopped classifying them as part of the fisheries thing? I'm
not absolutely into history. Sorry, I'll put that back if people are still writing. Tracy, I can't say absolutely, like exactly.
It was around there sometime if it wasn't then.
Yeah. And I do know, like, so I think we were talking yesterday in my class about, I think people were saying 1969 being able to vote. Yep. So I'm not exactly
around
sure.
There.
Yeah.
I reckon the fisheries ones trace is much later.
Is that?
Much later.
Oh yeah, I can't quite remember. It's been like a year and a half since I did that part.
Yeah.
So like this 1967, from what I have read and do know, like it wasn't a fast move into self-determination and self-management. That's absolutely, it was a very slow process, and changes occurred over a very long period.
That fisheries thing just blows me away, like how we class people as being in a fish category.
Mm.
I might be completely out of place and wrong, but on the 26th of January 47 was when the government declared Australia an independent federation, and Indigenous and Torres Strait Islanders were no longer referred to as British citizens. I don't know, I'm sorry, about the fisheries and wildlife side of it. I don't. I just know that it was in 1947 was the year that we all stopped being, I mean, every Australian was considered a British subject until that date. And that's why World War I and most of World War II, we fought as the Australian Imperial Force, as we were part of the Poms.
Mm. But it's not that long ago, is it? That
No,
change
No.
occurred.
it's scarily close, isn't it?
Isn't it? It's
So close. You
there are
look at
countries
those
hundreds
dates.
of years old, and yet 70 years ago we were still Pommies. 80 years ago, still Pommies.
I find the worst part is that we're still not teaching our children this. Most of the stuff I heard in Cert 4 I'd never heard of before. No wonder half of Australia thinks the wrong things about what's going on, because we're not really taught the right stuff, where it's all dumbed down so that we don't seem like bad people that we're teaching our kids in school.
And that's the thing, isn't it? And like it occurs in Canada, it occurs in the US, wherever you have a dominant population that's writing the history books, you're going to have a watered down version of what happened.
So why are we teaching them that in school, though? Like, we know better now, so why aren't we telling them the truth?
Well, it does take too long for these changes to happen. I would say, from when we went to school and looking at our different generations, I would still say each generation has been taught something slightly different or more than what previously were taught. So we're definitely moving in the right direction, not moving fast enough for most people's liking, I would say. But there has been changes, but definitely needs to be much, much more.
TAFE was waiting for an Aboriginal teacher to get into this properly, so we just sort of took it on ourselves and learned ourselves at home. And I was in tears through most of this. I was like, that was nothing like what I'd heard, and I probably had a few things myself based on the things that I'd learnt back in school that I believed that were completely incorrect, and therefore when we did all this voting and stuff, I didn't understand any of this. No, I don't think probably half of the people did.
Yeah, and that's the thing, education, and that's why these programs, these units are really helpful, because the more education we have, the more we broaden our understanding, the more introspective we are and a bit more self-reflective of our own attitudes and our own biases. So it can only help, and the more we do it, the more we open up others to that process as well. So it is important.
I noticed one thing that wasn't mentioned in my TAFE course that freaked me out recently when I went looking at a job role, was through a hospital. And I had to go on Facebook, because that's where I go when I don't know the answer to stuff. And I posted, hey, does surveillance only have one meaning? Because I'm a bit concerned, because, no wonder Aboriginal people don't trust us. According to this job record, we need to surveil them. I went, I'm not a cop. What the hell does that mean? Thankfully, somebody else went in and looked up. It's apparently a medical term. And in that view, it made sense. But I went, well, why the hell didn't TAFE tell me I need to surveil people? This is ridiculous.
And it goes back to our language and terminology, doesn't it, too? So we need to be really mindful.
Yes.
Okay, so looking at Torres Strait Islander people. So when we talk about First Nations people, or we say Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, again, we're back to generalising and stereotyping categories of people with differences. So we need to understand that there are differences differences to mainland Australian people. There's differences, but there are commonalities. So the first European settlement in 1863 was established in the Torres Strait Islands, and the islands were annexed to the colony of Queensland in 1979. So 1879, sorry. So we're looking at, you know, different states and different aspects of what we do as well, and the way that the political systems work. So we're considering the Torres Strait Islanders as Indigenous peoples of the Torres Strait Islands and part of the Queensland state now, which when you look at political, economic and health systems and look at the support that's provided, a bit of a challenging space in that area as well. So, you know, the distance and the differences. It's interesting, you know, has anyone been to the Torres Strait Islands? Yeah, no, I haven't either.
I've been to the Solomons, same.
Mm. Mm. And lots of different islands, isn't there, Michael? And then, so even within the different islands, you've got differences as well.
Yeah, well, Papua, Solomons, Torres Strait, they're all the same neck of the woods, and they're incredibly. I've been to Papua, and they're confronting places.
Mm. Mm. And some extreme poverty.
Oh, massive.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a bit offensive. They say it's annexed by the quality of Queensland, and then the next line is still part of the state of Queensland. I'm like, really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Doesn't read that well, does that slide?
Language matters.
There might be a bit of bias in that slide.
That's why I like to, you know, these are haters' slides, not mine.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, good qualification.
Yeah, because like we're talking about last week, some of those videos where we're like, maybe not. So there's some people don't realize that like the term implicit bias. Sometimes you don't know that that's what you have until you're challenged. And sometimes even the people writing or recording videos, writing history, there's implicit bias sitting in that. And trying to identify it, and sometimes it'll slip past some people and others will be able to pick it up. Yeah. All right. So shall we have a 10-minute break? There's not too much more to go through, a couple of videos, and then we'll be done. Back at 10 past.
Right.
What's going on with that? Everything's going at once. Do that. I can probably also help with any Cert 4 questions. Like, not through you guys, obviously, but yeah, I've got a lot of stuff here already. So
Yeah. Excellent. All
I'll
right.
have a good look at it on the weekend anyway.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. Yeah. And if you get a little bit stuck, let us know. Okay. So another bit of research. Quickly, if you are able to, have a look at what you can find about what are some of the differences between Torres Strait Islanders and Aboriginal Australians, whether it be food, whether it be lifestyle.
Can I mention something at the moment?
Yeah.
Aren't Torres Strait Islanders people that basically live on the islands between, say, Papua New Guinea and the north of Queensland?
Mm-hmm.
And Aboriginal Australians are the ones that actually live in Australia. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, on the mainland. Yeah. So big difference right there.
And language as well would be a difference.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's just off the top of my head. Really.
Yeah.
Again,
Yeah. Good. Does anyone know how many islands there are?
how many what?
Islands there are.
Isn't there like I think there's about 200 more? No. Am I wrong? 20 or 200?
I thought there was 200.
Yeah, so there's a lot.
274. 274.
Wow. It's huge, isn't it?
Yeah.
Huge.
They're all north of Australia, apparently. I'm just reading it off the other screen.
Mm.
If only I could live on one of them, it'd be good.
Mm.
Languages, skin, art.
Are you looking for answers to this question, by the way?
If you just find something that's interesting that maybe you didn't know before or that you find interesting.
I just found, honestly, it was just a Google search,
Mm.
but it just says here, there's 4 main aspects of Aboriginal culture and Aboriginal families that are the same cultural and family links in Torres Strait Islanders, but they're not the same as each other's. So the 4 are family, land, law, and language.
Yeah.
Which all Aboriginals in their culture will basically, they come under that umbrella.
Mm.
Those same 4 points apply to the Torres Strait Islanders, but obviously different family restrictions or different family habit, different land, different laws, and a different language.
Yeah. Yeah.
Again, I don't know how accurate this is. This is, Dr. Google.
I know in Victoria they call them Kuris, and then in New South Wales they call them something else, and then in Northern Territory they call them something else, for example.
Apparently, it's insulting to call Queenslanders Koori, but in Victoria we've always known them as Koori. But I suppose it's not much different to New South Welshmen being referred to as Queenslanders when in fact they're from New South Wales. They wouldn't like it, and why should the Aboriginal people like it?
Yeah.
From my experience, when you get it wrong and they correct you pretty well straight away, you apologise to them and they understand.
Oh, of course.
Mm.
Well, it's the same as when people hear someone talk and they say, "Are you from Canada or America?"
Yeah.
They don't get shitty over it. They just tell you where they're from.
Yeah. And it is that asking from a place of genuine inquiry and not a judgmental space. So that's the key to, isn't it? That we're looking to learn, we're looking to be respectful. So the more we know from the person,
Actually,
the better it is. The better the relationship would be.
Only that, listening is probably one of the big key words.
Mm. So
Actually,
only
one of
17, Liz. That's interesting. Out
Yeah.
of that many
And
islands.
it says only 17 of the islands are inhabited. And it says also that although counted as Indigenous Australians, they are predominantly Melanesian and
Yeah.
ethnically and culturally different from Aboriginal Australians.
When I was in the Solomons, there's lots of different islands, but one of the biggest things that took me aback, but makes so much sense, is that they're all divided into small villages, and each village might be 400 to 500 people, forgetting about the Oniaris and the cities, and they're all family clans. So the young men actually have to leave the family village and go to another village or another island to find their wives. And the law was set up, it's the lady is the landowner. So the boys are always leaving home. See your mum, see your dad, off to, Island X to meet my new girlfriend type thing. And you just take it for granted. But like these guys are in outboard boats and motors that are on the high ocean and they're going between two islands. And it's like, I actually did the trip a couple of times with them, and it's like, you got to be keen.
Yeah, not easy.
But it's just like for us, it's, let's get a date, like let's get a phone, but for these guys, even the basic things are so different. I think their system's better.
Yeah, I wonder sometimes the stripping back to the simplicity of everything, how much better we'd be.
Well, that's a very simple system and it works really well for them.
Doesn't that system stem from to prevent incest?
Yeah,
of course. Yeah, of course.
And
Yeah.
So,
Sorry,
and they
can
would
you
have
say that
very
again,
strong
please?
laws about it, wouldn't they? To make sure that didn't occur.
Stop incest, Paul.
I'm sorry, mate. I did miss what you said. I'm sorry.
Yeah, to stop incest. Incest.
Is that why they're separated?
Yeah.
You're saying?
Yeah, they don't want to inbreed. So
Stop inbreeding.
Is that
Yeah,
the inbreeding you're
100%,
talking
because
between the
you're living in a
Indigenous
village
and
with your
Torres Strait
cousins and
Islanders?
Just from the young men going off to another island to find a partner, or to going away from home.
Yeah.
Oh,
going
yeah,
off
they have
country.
to.
Yeah.
Yeah, they have to.
Yeah.
Yes. They're not allowed to stay.
I just found what Michael was talking about as well on here on Dr. Google again, but a person of Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander is basically such because they're accepted by the community as such. So if their community says that they're Torres Strait Islander, then so be it. And if their community says they're Aboriginal, so be it. But what he said a minute ago about them being Melanesian is that the Melanesians are basically part of Papua New Guinea, apparently, according to this.
No, it's wrong.
That's what I thought. I thought it was still part of
Melanesians are south, and like Papua, Solomons, and I haven't been to Torres Strait, but you can actually see the ethnic closeness in the two groups between a Papuan and a Solomon Islander. Go south to Vanuatu and you're talking, that's Melanesian. That's completely different kettle of fish.
It says here, the proximity of the islands to Papua New Guinea became an issue when the territory started moving to gain independence from Australia, which it gained in 1975. The Papua New Guinea government objected to the position of the border close to the New Guinean mainland and the subsequent control that Australia exercised over the waters of the strait. So there's obviously issues about being between Australia and Papua New Guinea.
Yeah, but
100%.
issues for who?
I don't know, but there's always information if you keep reading.
Yeah,
Wikipedia, if you look at Wikipedia.
Yeah, that's probably a good idea.
So there's quite a bit out there. And it's clear that some people have an interest in geography and history and socio-political information, and others maybe not so much. And so, you know, it's quite interesting when you start going into that kind of stuff of whether, you know, those differences and the issues that occur. And when you look back, you can see in hindsight why some decisions were made and now the political fallout. And I think we'd all be joining Michael for a holiday.
Yeah.
And we
Oh,
could
it's a
learn
spectacular place. It's a
right in
spectacular
there,
place.
right in the middle of the culture. We'd get right into it.
Oh yeah, you actually draws you in. There's no doubt about it.
Nice, nice. All right. So when we look at some of the elements as well, so you talked a little bit about the law and that in relation to some of the cultural requirements that they have, that it wasn't written down and the elders were making decisions. So it is one of those things that when we have that that language and law and history that's passed down by the generations, when you have that break, the issues with the politicisation and the White Australia policy, and then also the stolen generations and the impacts of those, where, you know, lots of information, lots of culture, lots of history is just lost, which is a really sad thing that it isn't being passed down, and that whole lifestyles culture has just been interrupted. So the ceremonies, and now we hear a little bit more these days that, you know, people are trying to ensure that there is that continuation of culture, which includes the ceremonies, the sorry business, the women's business, the men's business, like making sure that those things stay and are part of culture is really, really important, and that we value that. And language, and I always find, so there were so many different languages that were functioning prior to European colonisation, and there is so little now.
120 now.
Yeah.
I just looked that up.
It's just, and I remember I went to an awards ceremony at Bankstown for one of the things when I was working there, and they had this school group that sang the national anthem in the local country language, and it was just beautiful. And I just think I think it's a shame we don't, similar to the New Zealand national anthem, I think it's a shame we don't hear a little bit more as part of our normal community practices. I think that would be nice.
Yeah.
So, oh, did you, Liz? Nice. Yeah. And I think that is something in schools we are seeing a little bit more of, actually. It's coming to be much more of a embedded into the systems, which is really positive. So the impact of colonisation, you know, the policies and the practices that contributed to disadvantage of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders is something that we need to recognise impacts now on the client relationship that you have. There's a difference in health status between our First Nations people and our non-Indigenous Australians, and that's the political program of Close the Gap. Now, that's been in existence for over 20 years, and that gap has not closed. So we need to be mindful about those priority targeting programs that we may be participating in, and really work, and it's part of your responsibility to actually provide some feedback in quality practice, you know, what works, what doesn't work. If you've got ideas, you know, it is always important that you do put them forward. And we're likely to find that there's lower levels of health status, higher mortality, higher morbidity rates, and lower life expectancy is still evident. And when we consider aged care, we're looking at the 65 plus for non-Indigenous Australians, depending on your services and programs, or where you look in government systems, you might be looking at 50 to 55 is the definition of aging for First Nations people because of that difference in health status.
Can I ask one question that never got cleared up for me in Cert 4?
Mm-hmm.
And it purely came up because they wanted us to do a role play based on it after all the stuff we'd read about men's business and women's business. And then the role play they wanted us to do was, was for me as a female to talk to a male. And I went, hang on a minute, you've just taught me that that's not correct. And now you want me to do a role play showing you how I'm doing the wrong thing.
What role players are trying to do is to, and I don't know, don't have any idea about that assessment specifically, but I'll speak to the role plays that we do. The idea is that we are trying to give a scenario that may occur in an organisation, in a workplace, in your experience.
Yeah.
And we're trying to give you some ideas around what may be presented and then how you would react to that. So you may very well be in a position where you're allocated a male that has gender specific care needs, and you actually have to work with them and work out how to either resolve, reallocate, support, maybe give support with their consent. So part of that, depending on the role play and what we're looking for, part of that may be you identifying that you actually can't do a single thing. And how are you going to fix this?
Well, yeah, that's what I thought. I thought,
yeah,
you've just finished telling me he's not supposed to talk to me, and now you want me to go and talk to him about things he doesn't want me to talk to him about.
Yeah, but that actually may happen. Like you may be allocated to somebody that doesn't want to talk to you. How do you fix that? How do you speak to them? How do you resolve that? What are you going to do? What is your next action?
Well, that is still my question. Dave never answered this, and this is why I was so confused.
Well, guys, what would you do?
They could reallocate. If it's really intransient, you could reallocate, but it's worth a crack just to try to. Times have changed. People, like my experience in the islands, is they do want to chat and they do want to open up and they do want a different opinion. But if it's really in transit, just reallocate it to a male.
Well,
or
yeah, the
reallocate it to
particular
a female.
thing was a sexual thing, and it was, they'd specifically been teaching us that men aren't supposed to talk to women about that stuff.
Yeah, but come back to something that I said. Come back to something that I said earlier too. We always need to be mindful that we don't stereotype a group as well. So just because we say that it's men's business or men might not want to talk to women, we also need to keep in mind that that specific person, that individual, may not have an issue at all.
Yeah, okay. I just didn't want to offend and felt like the whole thing was offending people.
But we're looking for something specific, and it's how do you adjust, how do you work, how do you modify whatever's in front of you, because I can't tell you what might be in front of you on any given day at the workplace.
Well, TAFE ended up modifying it for me because I had such a big issue with it, and they turned it into a female for my role play because I just couldn't get my head around it.
Yeah, and that's the thing that we need to be. That's what we as trainers are looking for when you're doing your role play, is that we're looking for your ability to work with what's in front of you. Whether it means you actually don't do a single thing but you're referring on, or whether it means you're attempting to get more information so that you can make a referral, whether it is something that you can use your active listening and your questioning and the developing a relationship, and you actually are able to work with that person. So there's a whole
Be much
range of
easier if we had a teacher.
yeah. And 51, Pierre, I don't recall singing God Save the Queen.
You don't?
No,
I
we
don't have any memory of it.
Yeah, in primary school, every
Actually,
Monday
yeah,
morning
I
we
can
used to
remember
sing
it too. I'm 48.
We used to, well, I'm 57, and primary school, we used to line up on the basketball court every Monday morning while they
Yep.
raised the flag and sing God Save the Queen.
Yeah, same.
we done exactly the same thing.
There
And
you
the
go.
Australian anthem.
You
Yep,
must be coming up there
Australian
my
anthem.
age there, Pierre.
We didn't
Grade
have an
4.
Australian anthem.
Yeah,
It was just
you're
God
right,
Save the Queen.
we didn't,
And they did it every day.
and they keep sticking their flag on our flag.
Yeah, well, they won't be singing that anymore.
No, they won't, will they? I wonder.
No.
It'll just be the national anthem.
Can I just
Sorry, Liz.
Oh, sorry. I just wanted to say, yeah, we used to sing the Australian anthem in grade 4 at one school I used to go to. But I just wanted to talk before about when you're talking about Australian convicts or what we were talking about before. When I went to the UK last year, I went from one end of England to the other on the train, and this guy has this belief that we all come from there anyway. He goes, "You're all ex-convicts anyway. You all come from here." That's what he said to us on the train. So, I mean, my parents are European and English, but yeah, that's their how they
so
think.
some really, really different beliefs.
Yeah.
I don't know. If anyone else has been to England, I went after I left uni, and after the first year of working, I saved enough to go over, and we did the whole, all of the tourists, the castles, the museums, that kind of thing. And I walked away with this extreme feeling of, I want to be a Republican. I don't want to be a monarchist. I cannot believe the colonization, the comments, the way that they spoke about the colonies and what they did. And I just it was amazing to me then. And I wonder whether it still is the same, like that same feeling if I walked in.
That's what that guy was basically saying. He goes, "You're all ex-convicts anyway."
Yeah.
It's not so much ex-convicts. I've been there heaps, but the one thing that blew me away was Churchill's speech to Parliament in 1940 was basically along the lines of, well, if we fail, it doesn't matter because our colonies will come and they will take it all back. So the consensus in England is that they've got this massive organisation behind them, and less than 100 years ago, that was the case.
Yeah.
And it hasn't changed. I don't believe it's changed in the average mindset. I don't know how many pubs and beers I've had in pints in the UK. It's exactly the same. Like, oh, you're just one of us.
You know what? I believe it too because my father, I'm from a Lebanese background, and my father told us that our ancestry is from England, and my surname's Barber, and that's for a Lebanese bloke, everyone freaks out and says, "Where'd you get Barber from?" But it actually comes back from England. So
yeah.
Interesting the way that England and that colonization, and even the French, when you look at Vanuatu now.
That's a disgrace.
Yeah, the impact that has on those countries, both for self-identity, but also for, that outside view in, it really, that stereotyping or that limiting, it's so obvious, isn't it?
I just went on a holiday there only a month and a half ago. No, I can't believe what's happening.
That's interesting. I went there about 6 years ago and it was tense then. There was a big divide between the local French and the local, and they weren't happy.
So when you look at like a place like Vanuatu that's still having that kind of issue, And then you look at Australia and you look at our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders, and, you know, it's not smooth sailing still. There's still tension here, but we're nowhere near that same kind of issue that Vanuatu has. But we still have those impacts, and they're generational. So, you know, our First Nations people are much more likely to be living in poorer socioeconomic situations, much more, the numbers are much higher than non-Indigenous in jails. The secondary education, the numbers there are really, really poor. And then when we think about health status, also think about the impact of geographical access or non-access, and education access, and the community around in some of those really regional or remote places. So we've got lots of impacts that they're still happening for us. And we need to keep working on that. So it is an important thing. Yeah.
That was one of the things that we learned, was the statistics of the amount of Aboriginal children that die today. And that was, what was it? Up to 80% of Aboriginal children under 5 still die today. Which, like, if that was white kids, we'd be up in arms.
So we have some negatives that we really need to battle when we think about our clients and our services. These are the things that you need to bear in mind when you're working with clients from Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander background. Those experiences that they're bringing with them are barriers that you have to work through. Also, when we're looking at the trauma and the trauma backgrounds, so we need to really work within a trauma focus and make sure that we're holistically supporting our clients and understanding why some of those reactions and interactions are happening that you may see throughout your relationship and your counselling with them. We're not watching this. This is 18 minutes worth. So if you are interested in that, you can watch that when it comes back to you.
So where does it come back to you?
You'll get a email.
Okay.
Yeah. So we do have some protective factors. So we need to think about what is protective, and in your work with clients, that's what you would definitely be looking at. That strength-based and protective support, and making sure that you really do have a good understanding of what works for people. And I'm sorry, Phil, I know you're trying to write, and Michael, but I'm really quickly flicking through because it's...
No, it's okay, go. We'll get them off the thing. No, it's all good. Yeah. No worries.
And then looking at addressing that disadvantage. So what are we doing? What policies are in place? What programs? What funding, what government policies are currently working and not working? So we need to look at that and look at it with a critical eye. Sometimes, you know, throwing money at something and saying that this is what we're doing is not the best thing. We need to really critically review our programs. Okay, so being mindful of our resources and what we have available to work with the clients. Absolutely make sure that you are aware of how to work in a culturally competent way, and support your clients and ensure that they are able to engage with you because you have developed that therapeutic relationship, taking into account, you know, the specific cultural needs that they may have. All right. So we quickly looked at a little bit of terminology and history and our First Nations culture, some of those issues. And as always, you've got your learner guide, and that will give you a little bit more information for your assessments. I will talk about this unit's assessments next week, just having a quick look through just so that everybody knows what you're required to do for this one. Any questions from anyone on today? All good. All right. So, Pierre, I do have, and Tracy, I do have the PowerPoint for the induction. I can send it to you if you want me to.
Oh, I've still got TAFE's ones. So
You've got that,
yeah,
okay.
got all of that if I need it, but
Okay.